The Galactic Academy's Xenobiology lecture hall fell silent as Instructor Velrath entered through the reinforced doorway. The Quellan professor's crystalline exoskeleton reflected the ambient lighting as she gestured to the containment handlers behind her. Every cadet in the amphitheater-style classroom leaned forward, their various sensory organs focused on what was about to emerge. Today, Velrath announced, her translator rendering her clicking speech into standard galactic. We introduce you to apex predators from Krevthun, a Death World Classification 7. These are Shadowmaw cubs, approximately 6 standard months old. Mira Solis sat in the middle row, her human fingers drumming against her datapad. She'd been the only human admitted to the academy this cycle, a fact that made her simultaneously invisible and hypervisible depending on the day. Today, she was just another cadet, grateful for the anonymity. The handlers brought in 3 cubs, each the size of a large earth dog but built like concentrated violence. Their obsidian fur seemed to absorb light, and their 6 eyes glowed with an unsettling amber intelligence. Rows of crystalline teeth protruded from their powerful jaws, and their movements carried a predatory grace that made most of the herbivorous cadets shrink back in their seats. The Quellan beside Mira chittered nervously. 2 rows down, a Plenari cadet's feathers puffed up in a defensive display. Even the usually stoic Kryn cadets, who prided themselves on military discipline, tensed visibly. These specimens, Velrath continued, are being socialized for research purposes. They are muzzled and sedated, but remain dangerous. You will observe proper protocols. The handlers released the magnetic leads. The cubs stood motionless for a moment, surveying the room with predatory calculation. One handler, a heavily armored Vriex, extended a feeding treat toward the nearest cub. The creature ignored it entirely. Then something shifted. The largest cub's nostrils flared. Its 6 eyes swept across the auditorium before locking onto someone in the middle rows. Before anyone could react, the creature bolted up the stairs with shocking speed, its claws scraping against the metal flooring. Cadets scattered. Someone screamed. The handlers shouted, commands that went unheeded. The cub reached Mira's row and stopped directly beside her seat. For a frozen moment, the entire hall held its breath. The creature was massive up close, its shoulder reaching Mira's seated eye level. It regarded her with an intensity that sent ice down the spines of every observer. Then the Shadowmaw cub did something unprecedented. It sat, not in the aggressive, ready-to-pounce posture they'd been warned about, but in a relaxed position. Its tail, which had been rigid with hunt tension moments before, curled loosely around its haunches. The cub's head tilted slightly, and a low rumbling sound emerged from its chest. Not a growl, but something almost like a purr. Extraordinary, Velrath whispered, her translator barely catching the word. Mira remained perfectly still, her heart hammering but her breathing controlled. The cub leaned closer, and she could feel its breath against her arm. Then it did something that would be replayed in xenobiology classes for decades to come. It laid its massive head on her lap. The second and third cubs, seeing their siblings' behavior, abandoned the handlers entirely and bounded up the stairs. They arranged themselves around Mira with the same inexplicable calm, one pressing against her legs while the other sat at her feet, looking up with what could only be described as adoration. Cadet Solis, Velrath said, her voice carrying a note of scientific fascination that overrode her alarm. Remain absolutely still. I am still, ma'am, Mira replied, her voice steadier than she felt. Her hand, seemingly of its own accord, moved toward the head in her lap. The cub's eyes closed as her fingers touched the space between its ears. A senior handler approached cautiously, speaking into his comm unit. I've never seen Shadowmaws behave this way. They should be agitated, territorial, but they're completely docile with her. Mira's fingers found the soft spot she'd been searching for instinctively, and she began to scratch. The purring sound intensified. The cub at her feet rolled onto its back, exposing its vulnerable belly in a display of absolute trust that no one had ever documented in this species. How are you doing that? The Quellan beside her whispered, having regained some courage now that the danger seemed to have passed. I don't know, Mira admitted. I'm just treating them like I would any animal back home. Any animal? Velrath approached slowly, her scientific curiosity overcoming her caution. Cadet Solis, I need you to understand. These are not domesticated creatures. They're apex predators from a world where even the plants hunt. What you're doing should be impossible. Mira looked down at the cub in her lap. Rikar, according to the designation on its collar. The creature gazed back at her with what looked remarkably like contentment. Permission to speak freely, ma'am? Granted. Earth is classified as a death world too, isn't it? Maybe they recognize something familiar. A Kryn cadet spoke up from the front row, his military bearing restored now that the crisis had passed. Are you suggesting these apex predators see you as one of them? Not exactly, Mira said, her hand moving in slow, soothing strokes across Rikar's head. But humans didn't get to the top of Earth's food chain by being gentle. We're predators too, just socialized ones. Maybe they sense that. The potential for violence, paired with the choice not to use it. The third cub had worked its way entirely onto Mira's lap, displacing its larger sibling. The handlers watched in amazement as she accommodated both, adjusting her position to support their weight. Fascinating, Velrath murmured, already composing research notes in her mind. The human predator-prey duality. You carry the physiological markers of a hunter, forward-facing eyes, omnivorous dentition, endurance-based pursuit capabilities. But you've evolved social cooperation that supersedes individual aggression. We also domesticated wolves, Mira added. Turned apex predators into pets over thousands of years. Maybe these guys can smell that history on me. The scent of predators who chose partnership over domination. Rikar made a sound that was half growl, half contented sigh. His massive paw reached up to rest on Mira's arm. Claws retracted in a gesture of gentle contact. The lecture hall remained silent as students and instructors alike processed what they were witnessing. In galactic society, predators were studied from behind barriers, controlled with technology, respected for their danger. The idea of physical affection between species separated by such vast evolutionary distances was theoretically possible but rarely observed. Yet here was a human cadet, barely out of her teens, serving as a pillow for three of the most dangerous juvenile predators in known space. Well, Velrath finally said, her tone mixing resignation with scientific delight, I believe we've discovered an unexpected variable in interspecies interaction protocols. Cadet Solis, it appears you've been volunteered for an extended research project. Mira looked down at the cubs surrounding her, at Rikar's trusting eyes and relaxed posture. Despite the bizarreness of the situation, despite being the subject of dozens of staring cadets, she felt something unexpected. Kinship. I can live with that, ma'am, she said, scratching behind Rikar's ears as the cub's purring intensified. In the Galactic Academy's long history of documenting interspecies relations, this moment would be marked as significant the day they learned that sometimes predators recognize their own, not as threats, but as family.